We've heard from the International Monetary Fund on what is required by the Sri Lankan side. Sri Lankan authorities say that a debt sustainability report will be submitted to the global lender by August this year in a bid to secure the 17th IMF program, an extended fund facility arrangement for the island nation to overcome the current economic crisis. But is this sufficient? What more long-term measures must Sri Lanka implement in the present so that Sri Lanka overcomes any mid-term to long-term challenges that the country may face, given the foreign exchange shortage and the long-term economic challenges posed on the country? We've invited to our studios Emeritus Professor of Sociology from the University of Colombo, Professor Siri Hettige, to join us tonight. A very warm welcome to you.
You're welcome.
It's been some time since we spoke about this, but this economic crisis, we've spoken before too, Professor, that we've seen red flags, we've seen signs of a deteriorating economy for some time. Of course, the causes of the economy have been discussed, but how do you analyze the progress we've made so far in terms of mitigating the effects of the current challenges?
Well, this is an unprecedented situation, and therefore we cannot really, manage such an unprecedented crisis in the way that we usually manage day-to-day, affairs. In other words, how do we get ourselves organized? Do we have, set up a system, management system to really manage various aspects of this crisis? It's not just, the economic crisis, it's not just the debt crisis. It is not confined to the structure of the economy and so on. All these are really in the background. But you see, the point is that this has really brought down so many aspects of our life. For instance, our society is in disarray, impact is felt by almost everyone, across the country and so on. And then the whole cultural scene is dead. I mean, culture is part of life. You have so many people engage in cultural activity. When I say cultural activities, is in a very broad sense. We have people who are artists who make a living by performing music and so on and so forth. And then you have people who produce various other items that they want to really take out to people and so on. And then you have, whole social life. I mean, human beings really cannot live without social life, because that's what sustains, our networks, our relationships, our solidarity, our cooperation, and so on and so forth. So the point is that we need to really, look at all these aspects. And then, of course, the whole, let's say the institutional fabric of society, because if you don't really have functioning institutions in the way that they can deal with issues as and when they arise and resolve them, then we are also in a serious situation. And then we have, let's say the whole population being affected. For instance, we have children, small children being affected. I mean, they wouldn't know what's really going on around them, but on the other hand, they are also being impacted upon. And then, of course, younger children who are going to school, young people who are really, in the universities and other training. So the point is that almost everyone is being affected. So the point is that how do you really manage all these simultaneously? It's not just one after the other. It's a matter of managing all these things together. So my main point is, do we have the organizational setup that is required to manage a crisis that has arisen? Of course, we knew that this was coming over several decades, because when you look at really the structure of this economy over the last, say, 2 decades, for instance, it really changed in a way that was certainly not sustainable.
So if you go back to your question, Professor, do we have the organizational setup to counter this challenge? And you say this is a crisis we've foreseen for decades.
Yeah.
We've seen this coming. So where did we fail in setting up this organizational structure?
I think the moment you realize that, let's say for instance, we faced a tsunami, in 2004. And what did we do? We immediately set up an organization at the national level, with the experts sitting around the table, looking at all aspects of the impact of the tsunami. That was a one-off event. And also that was something that was unexpected. But still, we responded by setting up an organization that was entrusted with the responsibility of planning the whole management aspect of this, event that happened in 2004. But of course, it was a very limited, compared to what we have now, it was a very limited thing. It was not as, widespread as, let's say, the present crisis. Tsunami was impacted on the coastal areas of the country. And then, it was, for a short period, it didn't last long. The whole devastation happened. But then, the space was there for people to pick up the pieces and then to, get the people from the harm's way and then to, set up various, like camps and so on and so forth. And then, so the point is that why did we respond to such a, such an event by setting up a national level body? Because you wanted to get the best minds in the country to sit around the table and figure out how to really respond to this situation that had arisen and to plan for recovery. Now, of course, as I already mentioned, this is a much bigger, all-encompassing crisis. And here you have to have not just one group of people sitting around the table. You need a whole range of groups working on various aspects of this. Now, say
does
for
this
instance,
mean we have failed to bring together, a whole spectrum of people across?
I don't see such kind of arrangement, myself, and maybe it is hidden away, from our view. I don't know, but I don't see that. But the point is that the moment we heard that this tsunami recovery, arrangement were made, like that was done. That organization itself became known, and there was a spokesperson who came out and said that this is how we are managing, this is what we do, this is what, and so on and so forth. So the point is that the coordination is very, very critical, because like when it is something that is all encompassing, it is absolutely necessary to keep it together, and so on. So. And then also what you do, there are so many things to do, by so many people and so on. So what I'm getting at is that, if we really look at it from kind of a, holistic perspective, you will see an international dimension, and then you see a domestic dimension. That's really the bifurcation. You have to have this apex body, but then you have these two, let's say, formations, one dealing with the international dimension, like, for instance, this is a crisis which is, rooted in this country, but it has, international ramifications. And we know one thing, we cannot really manage this without the collaboration, support, and the engagement of a whole range of international players. For instance, we have, the multilateral, you talked about the IMF, and then there are so many other multilaterals like the World Bank, ADB, and so on and so forth. And then you also have the bilaterals. We are also dealing with countries one-to-one. And that is what, we have been doing, all these years, after independence. So we establish, and, we are closer to certain countries than to the others, but nevertheless, we have the bilateral arrangements, for various things. And then you also have this massive resource that is at our disposal, and that is what we call the global civil society. Global civil society is not just civilians, scattered around the world. We are talking here about organized groups, organizations, for instance. Like you have, let's say, development, non-governmental organization, development-oriented, welfare-oriented, organization. in disaster management oriented organizations, and then you have various other groups operating on a global level, and basically doing so many things across the world when countries get into a serious kind of situation. And then also, of course, we are dealing with so many global challenges, like for instance the climate change is around us. It is not something that is in the horizon, that is already here. And then we have all kinds of disasters happening from time to time in different places, and there's a war going on in Europe, and so the point is that global civil society is a major resource that we have to tap in a very systematic.
Why have we failed to tap this resource?
Well,
I mean, you speak of this, you're very confident that Sri Lanka will actually benefit out of global civil society fund, but what have we not done in order to tap that resource?
I think I cannot answer that question, because you see, I think I haven't seen journalists putting these questions to people who matter. I mean, we are basically, concerned citizens. We are basically, looking at it from our own perspectives, like, I'm a sociologist, and I look at it from a certain perspective, and then there are economists looking at it from a certain perspective, and so on. So the point that I'm trying to make is that getting ourselves organized in the best possible way is the first thing that you do, and that you should do, because, we need to have all the expertise that we can mobilize from within the country and also from without, because there are Sri Lankans who have excelled in their own fields and economics, in various other fields, and they should be really tapped. And to do that, you have to have these organs. So what I'm getting at is that how do you manage the domestic problems that we are facing? The point is, we have on the one hand, the massive social impact. I mean, people can't, really move around now. And if people can't move around, they can't live a normal life, because they can't go to work on time, and they can't get their children out into schools, and they can't go to a hospital if they are seriously ill, and so on and so forth. So the point is, the life is, is very complicated now. And then, of course, if people can't really move around, they won't be able to work. And if they are not people, from the privileged, kind of background, naturally they are hand to mouth. And if they can't, go out and work and earn their day-to-day living, then they are really in a bad way. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that everybody has to be on the move. That is what modern societies are all about. But the fact of the matter is that many people cannot, really get around and attend to whatever they are supposed to do. Like, for instance, even people who are working in, various institutions. Now, say, for instance, the private sector is the largest employer. I mean, government sector is very important in this country, we know that. But the point is that, the private, corporate sector institutions, can they function effectively when, you have a situation like this? And then, of course, millions of people who are going around, making a living by doing, small things, selling things on the pavement, carrying things, to the market, and so on.
I'd like to speak further on that and the social impact of the current crisis on the individual lives in the country. We'll speak of all that when we return after this break at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24. Welcome back. We're in conversation with the Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Colombo, Professor Siri Hettige. We've been talking about the current crisis, the social impact, and what the challenges the general public are faced with. But now, what must the government do, Professor, in order to relieve the people of this stress? We see that the World Food Programme is warning that 6 million people, over 6 million in Sri Lanka, are food insecure due to rising inflation. Prices are soaring, and there are shortages to essentials, and the government too is finding it difficult to procure any basics to fulfill the requirements domestically. So what do you recommend that the government does right now?
I think we have come a long way, and we had so much really time to really reflect on the situation and come up with let's say an overall plan to manage this kind of crisis. I mean, this organizational setup I just talked about. But I think what is also important is that there is an increasing tendency towards, let's say, further division of society. On the one hand, on the other hand, we also have a huge political issue here. You see, there is no consensus. Like for instance, when we had this massive tsunami, people basically closed ranks, and they really came together to really find a way to really deal with the problem. But what you really see is a very different picture, and there is no change in the way the whole issue is managed, and the way the problems are addressed, and therefore we have this very widespread let's say anxiety on the part of the people. On the other hand, you have many people who are so agitated, and there are people who are demanding a drastic change in the whole let's say political establishment. And I think these are things that we cannot really overlook. I think unless and until you establish let's say public order where the people really get on with their lives, hoping that let's say the government would really address their sort of issues. But what we have seen over the last few months is worsening of the crisis, and people don't see an end to this. And therefore, I think it is absolutely necessary that we find a political settlement to this crisis. Because it is not just an economic crisis, it's a political crisis as well. And the settlement would be like many people have been arguing for an interim administration.
But how do you propose we go there? Because it seems that the political authority, Professor, does not seem to be able to find a solution in reaching consensus among parties. We see Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was just the only representation of the United National Party, that too from a national list, gaining premiership. And then following that, if we take events after his premiership being appointed, the SJB, the JVP and the SLFP to SLPP, we don't see any of them coming into common consensus or to form a national government of unity. That's what we've been calling for. Why do you think, is this because there's no political will to solve the crisis, or is it that these political parties are still after petty political agenda?
I think the main responsibility rests with the government. The main responsibility rests with the government. You see, the other parties, other stakeholders, put forward various ideas and so on and so forth. The point is that we have to create that space that is required for us to address this issue that is really affecting everyone, everyone. And then, to really, resolve long-term political issues like, which party is going to, really, form the next government and so on. That actually can happen only after, let's say the next election, for instance. So I think until the next election, there has to be an arrangement which is credible, which is really not divisive, not really undemocratic. You see, unless we face this reality and create that space, that is required for the political leaders and parties and groups to work together for a very short period until we overcome the most difficult situation that we are in today, and that is to really make sure that the people can get on with their lives. And at the moment people cannot really get on with their lives. There's no life for many people. When you talk to them, you realize they are basically marking time. People cannot concentrate on anything. People are just focused on day-to-day things, like how to get around, how to go to a hospital, how to find enough money to buy the basic things for their families. And so the point is that is really not something that people can live for long. I mean, when a society is so destabilized, it is no point in talking about long term let's say perspectives. What is really required is to create that space that is required for us to address the day-to-day problems that we are facing, so that we will be able to prepare the ground for the change that might happen after an election.
You mentioned change, Professor. Now we saw people going out to the streets in struggle, in protest, carrying out demonstrations, calling on the government, the head of state, to step down. We see them being organized now too. People are gathering in groups to put pressure on the current regime. What, in your view, should we do? Should the president step down, or should the prime minister step down? Or should the cabinet be dissolved at this state? The Bar Association too had proposed a set of recommendations where they call for a competent authority be set up to run the government. So how do you recommend we move about this?
Many modalities have been presented by various groups, and I don't see any movement on the part of, let's say, the authorities to really respond to this. So the point is that unless we have let's say a new lease of life, unless we have let's say an administration in Colombo which is really acceptable to all the competing groups, various stakeholders, and so on and so forth, so that they could really contribute to dealing with the problems on a day-to-day basis, so that we will be able to stabilize various institutions and various aspects of the economy and so on and so forth, so that people can really get on with their lives. I think that is what is required at this stage. So the point is that the demands are there, but we don't see any response.
So this administration, an administration, you say, should come together. But how do you suggest that administration be set up? There is a political authority, there is a legal system that governs, there's a constitution. Within that framework, Professor, how do you recommend that the leaders work within that framework to bring in a solution, and a solution that the people can trust and have faith in?
No, I think the point is I'm not a kind of expert in these areas, so I don't want to really be very specific. But what I feel is that there is a demand for change, and I don't think that we can ignore this demand, because you have more and more people joining and asking for let's say an administration that would represent the interests of the wider public rather than different political groups. You see, so the point is that different modalities have been presented, like for instance a national government, a government that really represents let's say different political configurations, and then also of course the most importantly the interests of the people, irrespective of all these divisions that we are talking about, because here we have the vast majority of the people not being able to live their lives and, basically, meet the basic needs of their family members. And so I think it is very, very necessary that we, bring about a political, arrangement, which is, not going to be permanent, which can be the kind of interim arrangement, but that would satisfy, on the one hand, the people. That is, people should be pacified. In other words, they should settle down, and they should not be forced to, always, go out and agitate and so on and so forth. They should be able to, engage in their day-to-day activities. The professionals, the ordinary people doing various jobs and so on and so forth. The people who work in government institutes, I mean, they have to basically, they should be able to get on with, these activities. But the fact of the matter is that nothing is possible unless you have a credible, arrangement, at the apex of the political kind of system, so that people can, really say that, okay, we can look forward to the kind of political change that we desire, within a year or so. But until then, we manage within this interim, situation, within this interim arrangement that we have. I think that is the main issue. You see, I mean, if you don't have an interim arrangement, that would be acceptable to the wider public, the international community, and everybody else.
That solves the question of the public displeasure and building trust among the general public, the citizens of the country who are faced with these challenges, who are in dire straits because basic necessities are not provided. They have to make ends meet, but yet, as you said, Professor, day to day, finding solutions to day-to-day minor matters have become a challenge in today's society. But the question of the real economy in that case, whichever government or administration comes to power will have to find dollars, will face these same challenges. A transition in power will not solve these the current shortages or the issues of dollars that we are faced with. So how do you think a new government or a new administration that is set up could transform this overnight?
I think already people are working on these long-term remedies. You see, for instance, people are on the one hand working on the constitution, people are working on the economic models that we should really, introduce. And they are talking about, how the public administration can be revamped, and they are talking about, how we should work with international agencies and international. So I think all that is happening even right now. I mean, all the groups, civil society groups and professional groups and so on and so forth, they are all, working. And I think, these ideas are being presented also to political parties and so on and so forth. And the political parties, will themselves have to really come up with, new perspectives as to how to restructure the economy and so on and so forth. So the point is, we have a long-standing problem with the economy, and we didn't have a balanced economy for a long time. For instance, we have a highly distorted economy. For instance, our industrial sector has been very weak, and then, our agricultural sector has not been really fully, supported, by governments, and as a result, it has not been, really dynamic and so on and so forth. And the whole range of industries that could be built on agriculture and biomass, I mean, all that has not been there. And then the whole energy sector issue. I mean, the point is that this is a country where you would have, easily managed this energy crisis if we had really had long-term, energy policies. Like, for instance, we would have been, we were about 80% dependent on hydro, in the 1980s, for instance. We were only 20% dependent on fossil fuel, and so whereas today we have brought this whole equation down, and we have only about 40%, coming from hydro, and that is because the demand for energy has increased and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that we have this huge potential for solar power, huge potential for wind power, And then there are so many other, renewable, energy sources that are around, may not be as big as, let's say, solar and so on. But the point is that we didn't do really very much on transforming, the energy sector. And similarly, our transportation sector. I mean, we had a fairly good public transport system in the country, in the early 70s when we were students in the university in Colombo. But the fact of the matter is that, we put the whole transport system on its head, and we have now 80% dependent on private transport. I mean, not even the most developed country in the world. I have lived in a few of those countries for, a certain period. And I have seen even the most developed countries where they have no problem with, buying cars and so on and so forth, are heavily dependent on public transport. And here in this country, with this kind of an economy, and we have basically promoted private transport. Now you can see the crisis.
But our politicians fail to develop our public transportation system.
Absolutely.
Even at this stage, Professor, I think this is a great opportunity for our politicians to use this opportunity to transform the public transportation system.
We need to transform not just the transport system, we have to transform almost all aspects of our society.
What in the long term, we have just 5 minutes, I don't want to ask you too many questions, but in the long term, in order to make sure that our economy doesn't face what we're faced now, because you're talking about a glorious period back in the 60s and 70s, and where we had measures taken where we could rely on a system that the economy didn't face these challenges, but somewhere down the line we're faced with this crisis. So now what do we do so that generations ahead don't have to face this?
No, there were clear signs of this crisis way back, let's say 20 years ago, I can say. The point is that when you have a widening trade gap, when your imports are far bigger than what you can export to pay for those imports. Now that is not something sustainable. And then borrowing money, and then you have to ask the fundamental question: why do we borrow money? You have to borrow money for productive investment. And if you don't invest, what you borrow in productive, areas, you're going to have a huge problem, because you're not adding anything to the economy, in a sustainable way. So the point is that sustainable development, model is there for us to really look at closely, and then, fashion our economic and social sectors accordingly, which we haven't done. So the point is that, we have so many opportunities, when you look at all these things, but then we have not been able to really make use of those opportunities because we did not really have long-term a strategy for development and public welfare. Mm-hmm. Now, the point is that, today we have the vast majority of the people being so vulnerable, and that is because, we don't have, adequate, social protection measures built into our society, and as a result, a large proportion of the population remain vulnerable, and they have become more and more vulnerable over the last several years because of COVID initially, and then now with the present crisis and so on. So the point is that we need to really have a very different approach to economic development, public welfare, and then development in various sectors and so on and so forth, and then to make sure that our economy is balanced, our economy is not distorted as it is today. So the point is that these things have been discussed over time, but the fact of the matter is that in this country, decision making has been completely independent of those very, thorough discussions that have taken place in this country in different institutions, and then in different professional associations and groups and so on and so forth. In 2015, I myself got involved in a major effort to really get this message across to the powers that be, and we failed. And the point is that what they say when they come and inaugurate a seminar is something entirely different to what they do after they leave the conference hall. So you see, unless you bring the people who have the knowledge and the expertise together and then make best use of them to guide the political decision making, I don't think that you are going to make really headway in the way that we would like to see in this country in terms of further development, and then also, of course, public welfare and so
But in the immediate also, some interim measures where relief is provided. We've been complaining that the economy and the people have been dependent far too much, far too long on handouts, which is why, again, the economy came into this situation. But at this moment, people, those who are most hit, the most vulnerable, require welfare measures. The Prime Minister has pledged a welfare budget. But what can we do now to support these vulnerable communities?
No, I think the main problem is that we haven't done a needs assessment, and we have the capacity to do so. Our public administration, running from Colombo right down to the village, can really manage this. They can certainly do a needs assessment. In other words, we can set up, let's say, community-based, monitoring system, so that we will generate real-time data so that we know how many families in this particular Grama Sevaka division are in need of support. How many children are there who are deprived of their basic necessities? How many elderly people? How many let's say people with chronic ailments and so on, and so on and so forth. But the point is we haven't really done that. And I think that is a fundamental requirement if you were to mobilize resources, both from within the country and from without. The point is, without really knowing exactly what you need, how can you mobilize resources? We do not know. And this can be easily done because, as I already mentioned, you take the 330 odd, divisional secretariat divisions. And, each one of these can be easily managed. And then we would be able to tell the world, look, we have this massive crisis, and as a result, so many people have, so many needs, and these things, have to be met now, and therefore we need these resources. Unless and until we do that, we won't be able to really meet this major challenge of protecting the people who are falling through the cracks, and that is happening on a day-to-day basis. It happens every day, and I just cannot believe my eyes sometimes when I go around and talk to people. It's really incredible, and I think that kind of data is so critical, and I don't think that we have really started even looking at that as a proposition. And I think this is really what is missing in this whole exercise of managing public affairs in this country. And I think we have to really get on with it now. And I think an interim, credible interim, arrangement, at the highest level would certainly be the first thing to do. And then everything else should fall in place, including that whole management system that I mentioned at the outset. Right. I don't see any one of these things being done. At least I may be wrong, but at least I don't see it happening. And if I'm wrong, somebody should come and show me, okay, this is what we have done, and so on and so forth. But I don't see that being done right now.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, your observations. And on that note, we will have to wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you, Professor, for your time here. We had with us Professor Siri Hettige, Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Colombo, joining us tonight at Hyde Park to talk about the economy, the current challenges faced by the people of this country, and what immediate measures need to be taken. We'll see you again next week at the same time with yet another discussion at Hyde Park.